Hello again, everyone, and thanks for joining us for this Tuesday's edition of Alaska Weather. I'm Dave Percy, meteorologist with the National Weather Service. I'll be hosting today's show once again. Up first, I got a webcam image of Nuiqsut up on the eastern Beaufort Sea coastline. You can see bright sunshine up there all the way to the Arctic coast now, but temperatures not really responding at picture time here. They were 32 degrees below zero Fahrenheit, coming up a little bit during the day, but not all that much. Came up from a low, I believe, around 37, 38 below zero earlier. May drop to 40, 45 below tonight. And otherwise, for the hazardous weather graphics, no watches, warnings, or advisories for the Panhandle, southern Alaska, or the interior, or the North Slope, central interior areas, Bering Sea, and also out to the west. No watches, warnings, advisories for the next 24 hours, 24 hours anyway. But after that, might see some show up here from St. Lawrence Island, maybe the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta, possibly. More likely, though, I'll be up over the northwest interior as much stormier conditions move in on Thursday. Otherwise, today we've got moisture sort of hung up here over toward the eastern border down to the Copper River Basin. Snowfall amounts not too bad. Winds beginning to pick up here have picked up over the Copper River Basin and eastern Alaska Range. Packs and seeing winds gusting 30 to 40 miles per hour during the afternoon hours today, with Chitina gusts to about 30 miles an hour and 35 to 40 miles an hour at Valdez, with Kenai seeing 30 mile an hour wind gusts out of the north. Southern Kenai Peninsula, a place known as MacArthur Pass, at about the 1,300 foot level, had winds gusting to 70 miles an hour out of the north there. That's what we talk about, channeled areas. That's a good example right there. Otherwise, wet snow ended at Yakutat, with temperatures pushing into the upper 30s today. Rain showers and areas of rain diminishing but lingering over the Panhandle. About a third of an inch of liquid water equivalent precipitation, which fell in the form of rain really at most areas at sea level here for the Panhandle, occurred at Sitka, Petersburg, Juneau, and Hoonah, all 3 to 4/10 of an inch here in 12-hour period. Some areas down toward the south, like Shelter Cove, at over an inch. But that's all beginning to taper off. You can see of course, the frontal boundary moving through this, kind of really taking its time shifting eastward. One low center already into the Yukon. Another one hanging back in the Gulf, and that's keeping that southwest flow going. Clear skies here with gusty winds, 52 mile an hour wind gusts recorded at Kodiak State Airport this afternoon. Otherwise, lighter winds back to the west here, and it looks like actually that's the ground that is cold, near or below zero temperatures here west of the Alaska Range. There are some clouds coming across the northern Bering there, brought some snow and fog into the St. Lawrence Island area, and looks like some will push into the northwest coast there across the Chukchi Sea, and a weak system out here bringing light snow to Adak. There it is right there, really not too impressive of a system, especially compared to the next one that's going to be driving up into the Russian Far East late tomorrow and tomorrow night into Thursday. Low pressure here, tight gradient supporting those gusty winds I spoke of here along and south and east of the Alaska Range, with high pressure, light winds, cold temperatures here, and a lot of sunshine over the western central interior. And the showers over the Panhandle kind of linger tonight with this low drifting eastward, but weakening. Still onshore flow. Snowfall levels coming down slowly, so sea level areas will probably pick up some wet snow, but the amounts are becoming lighter and lighter with time. Got high pressure here off the southwest coast, and that extends up into the interior. So lows tonight, 35 to 40 below in the central interior, Tanana Valley, and anywhere from 40 to 45 below at the coldest here, up over from the Yukon Flats, across Arctic Village into the central eastern North Slope and the eastern Arctic coast, with light winds and clear skies. Light winds, clear skies also Bristol Bay, Alaska Peninsula, Kodiak, diminishing winds. Chance of flurries, fog, low clouds coming into the Yukon Delta coast with this weak system here, and that extends up to the northwest coast, Point Hope, Cape Lisburne, Kivalina. This system here that's really just washed down into a trough now with a barely visible low up there along the Russian coast, and high pressure building right back in behind it ahead of that big storm that you can just see coming onto the edge of the chart there over the Kamchatka Peninsula, with the low center still back over toward over the Sea of Okhotsk for tonight and into early tomorrow. But tomorrow afternoon, Frontal boundary pushes just onto the map there. You can see very tight gradient with that southwest flow on the increase here, shoving the ridge over, but holding pretty high pressures, 1,042 millibars near the Pribilofs tomorrow. A couple of weak disturbances tracking northeastward on the western side of this ridge. It's building over the interior. Could bring some few skiffs of flurries to the central Arctic coast, possibly Wainwright to Point Barrow, and over the Yukon Delta, same thing. And this really will be north of the Aleutians, not a factor at all. But weak low keeps a risk of a snow shower or two over the southeast coast. Definitely drier, a little cooler, and maybe some sun breaking out at times, especially in the afternoon. Lighter winds over south central Alaska and Prince William Sound, just a breeze. For the outlook on Thursday, you can see conditions come down dramatically here, a very tight gradient. That looks good for winds gusting 40 to 60 miles an hour and gusts maybe 80 miles an hour for places like Cape Lisburne and the western hills there, along mountains. And of course, throw some snow into that and you've got whiteout conditions, so it could be blizzard warnings all across this area for Thursday. And by contrast, sunshine, light winds. For southern Alaska here with much diminished winds, be colder temperatures, maybe some gusty winds, Lynn Canal out of the north from Skagway, maybe gusts 35, possibly 40 miles an hour there, and lighter winds and still a risk of some rain and snow showers over the extreme southern southeast coast, but dry, sunny, light winds, Kenai Peninsula, Kodiak Island, all the way out to the eastern Aleutians, Pribilofs, sunshine with winds turning south at about maybe 10 to 15 miles per hour. In the front here, really that trailing edge weakening, not much of a wind factor at all with just some light rain, but much milder temperatures coming up on those southerly winds out there. And for lows tonight, anywhere from 35 to 40 below central Tanana Valley to the upper valley there in 40 Mile Country, and maybe 40, 45 below for the north slope, or right along the coast, call it 35 to 45 below. And below zero temperatures all the way down to Bristol Bay, and with lighter winds, definitely falling below zero, farther than we did this morning for the areas of the Kenai Peninsula, Anchorage up into the Matanuska-Susitna Valley, maybe down to 15, 20 below around Willow. And then the highs tomorrow, teens, lower to mid, south central Alaska, either side of zero in the central interior and staying below zero from the Kobuk, Koyukuk, upper Yukon valleys northward to the Arctic coast. Highs in the upper 20s to mid 30s for the Panhandle, upper 20s for the Alaska Peninsula, right at the freeze point for the Pribilofs. Lows not really dropping much from your high tomorrow, upper 20s there, St. Paul, still well below zero eastern interior areas and below zero once again south central Alaska. Mid-teens to mid-20s for the Panhandle, followed by highs there in the 20s to lower to mid-30s over the southern southeast coast, and highs Thursday afternoon, a little milder over the remainder of the interior.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Flying weather tomorrow, IFR marginal VFR as southwest flow increases here in northern Bering Sea, and actually flow coming up and over the top of the ridge, southwest out here. Then this is actually slipping southeastward, and so we got some IFR up here, Kotzebue Sound, near Kivalina, down to Buckland, Shishmaref, another batch here along the Yukon Delta coast out to St. Matthew Island. And then kind of marginal to VFR for the southern Bering, VFR Alaska Peninsula, central eastern interior, all VFR down to the Gulf of Alaska. Southeast coast, still some IFR over toward the border, otherwise marginal. And by the afternoon, say goodbye to the IFR and just some areas of marginal VFR left. That may extend back toward Cape Yakataga. Otherwise, VFR over the interior. A little bit of moisture slipping southeastward here from that, when it was farther back to the northwest there. Could get into the Kobuk Valley there, maybe down to the Kuskokwim, northern Kuskokwim. I don't think it will, other than some clouds. Should stay VFR. Marginal VFR, northern Bering Sea to the Seward Peninsula. VFR here, Pribilofs, Atka, all the way up to the Alaska Peninsula. Kodiak VFR, south central Alaska. And then for the Thursday morning time frame, VFR over the northern Panhandle, some northerly flow, drying it out. Marginal VFR to the south, and some marginal VFR up along the North Gulf Coast there, but VFR Prince William Sound, south central Alaska, Maybe some marginal VFR here, north side of the Alaska Range, particularly in the greater Fairbanks area. Increasing marginal VFR out here over the southwest interior, the band of IFR right along the southwest coast. Otherwise VFR in North Slope and Arctic coast, and some pretty good ridging out here, keeping it VFR for the Pribilofs, Atka Island, Nikolsky, Unalaska, all the Alaska Peninsula, and frontal boundary pushing some IFR into the far western Aleutians. And that expands a little bit and tries to make some headway to the east, but wind flow directing it up to the northeast, southwest flow now coming in and bringing milder temperatures, more moisture in with IFR pretty likely along and south of the DeLong Mountains, Western Brooks Range. Selwyn Valley back out toward Kivalina, and the western, eventually the central Arctic coast. Staying VFR though, central eastern Bering Sea, all of interior Alaska, Panhandle, all VFR, marginal VFR now off the coast. And for passes, Anatuvik and Adigan, look for VFR another day tomorrow. And for Lake Clark and Merrill, VFR as well for both passes, rainy VFR and windy, call it VFR as well. Isabel VFR, Sealing's visibility is unlimited for both Isabel, Mentasta, and Tanita, good VFR. And Portage also VFR. Chilkoot and White VFR, if not the start, definitely finish the day VFR. And for the freezing levels, 2,000 feet off the chart here to the east. At the surface though, cutting up from Dixon Entrance along the coast to about Yakutat, and then plunging southward here with that push of cold air well south of Kodiak and the Alaska Peninsula, but rebounding out here with that flow on the backside of the ridge, kind of bulging it back to the north here, just west of the Pribilofs, 2,000 feet though, way out just near Shimia. And for icing, with that moisture coming up from the southwest, could see a chance of some icing there, St. Lawrence Island, northern Bering Sea, really not too significant. And scattered areas of mixed icing there for the Panhandle. I don't think any of it will be of the moderate variety, but mixed icing of the light variety. And for the jet stream, ridging out here over the Bering Sea, building up, and a pretty good jet coming over the top of that as this cold upper low pulls off to the east. 130 knot northerlies there, and then westerlies into the Dixon Entrance area at 140 knots, 9,000 feet, ridging, but really not cutting off the wind flow at all. So we have west-northwest, 10 to 20 knots here, 15 to 20 out over the Aleutians, southeast Bering Sea, increasing over the far western Aleutians as that big frontal boundary approaches. And 3,000 feet, lighter winds, high pressure here, weak low in the Gulf, followed by turbulence. Look for less weakening gradients, so less mechanical turbulence, still isolated moderate chop possible Kodiak Island. Best chance early in the morning, improving throughout the afternoon here, but all the North Gulf Coast, Kenai Peninsula, Prince William Sound. And then here comes a heavier turbulence to Shimmy and Attu.
Welcome back to another edition of Alaska Weather Facts. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider, and joining me once again is Eric Stevens from the Geographic Information Network of Alaska, or GINA, based at the University of Alaska Fairbanks. Eric, welcome back to the show.
Well, Dave, it's great to be back. Thanks for inviting us again.
Sure thing. And today we want to talk about identifying burn scars. That would be the burned up area after a wildfire when the flames and the smoke are gone. We can see it if you drive by it on the roadway, of course, but from satellite, we can also identify those places on the land, right?
You know it. You know that expression, ouch, that's going to leave a mark?
Yeah.
After you bang your knee getting out of the car.
Oh yeah.
Well, the ouch, it's going to leave a mark, that also applies to the landscape. Whenever a wildfire ravages through, it's going to leave a mark on the landscape. After a wildfire burns out, this is called a burn scar.
Okay.
And you can ask yourself, well, that's interesting. We can see a burn scar from space. Right. Then the question is, well, why does that matter?
Okay.
Who cares?
Yeah, fire's over.
Right, the fire is over. We don't need to worry about this anymore. It turns out you kind of do, because burn scars are important. There's this old rule of thumb in the weather business that flood follows fire.
Okay.
The action of the fire in killing off the vegetation, in baking, kiln drying the landscape a little bit, can hinder the land's ability to absorb rainfall. So if you have a fire, especially if it's in complex mountainous terrain.
Right.
This is classic in California. It can happen somewhat in Alaska too. You get a wildfire in steep, hilly, or mountainous terrain, rips off all the vegetation off the landscape. Then 6 months later, there's a big rainstorm, and you get a flash flood in that area. So
Right.
flood can follow fire. That's why you got to know
Okay.
where the burn
That's
scars
important.
are. Secondly, a fire needs fuel to maintain itself. So if there's an old burn scar left over from a year or two ago, and then another summer later here in Alaska in the interior, it's a big wildfire season. If there's a fire advancing toward an old burn scar, well, guess what? That old burn scars can be tougher terrain for that new fire to get through because there's not as much fuel in that burn scar. So they almost act like a natural fire break. These are a couple of reasons why you need to know where those burn scars are. Alaska Fire Service has limited resources. They want to put their people and their equipment
Sure.
where it does the most good. They need to know, well, this is an area where there's no burn scar. We better put people here because that fire could really run.
So
That's why
really,
we do
really
it.
important for weather forecasters and fire weather forecasters for sure.
Oh, yeah.
But then how do weather satellites actually detect those burn scars?
Ah, good question.
Thanks.
Well, let's turn the Wayback Machine to the summer of 2015. That was a
Okay.
very active year. Got a picture here taken up in the White Mountains. This is one of the fires in progress that summer, and if you look real close, you can almost see Frodo throwing the ring into
Right,
the
no kidding.
volcano there. So that's quite the vision. Well, let's look at a visible image. Here we are in Alaska's interior. This is before the fires got out of the cage in early summer of 2015. Let's zoom into the western interior here. Again, this is a weather satellite image of visible light, what the human eye can see. We're into the middle reach of the Yukon Valley there in the western interior, Galena area. And this is just a beautiful visible day. Nothing much going on. It's in early June before the fires really got active. But then in 2015, the fires got loose, especially in that western interior.
Right.
Here's another image. The same satellite pass as
Okay.
that visible image, but now we're not quite looking at visible light.
Very different.
There's a slight change here. This image incorporates something called the veggie band.
Okay.
0.86 micron wavelength. The micron's very tiny,
Yeah.
but that wavelength responds to vegetation, the chlorophyll. So trees and grasses reflect that part of the electromagnetic spectrum back to the satellite. And so the satellite sees that. When signal comes at that wavelength to the satellite, we know, there's some vegetation growing there. This is great. You can identify coastlines so easily because you go from vegetation to water. Turns out if you have a burn scar, guess what? You burned away the vegetation, so that's going to show up. We're going to do a before, during, and after kind of look here. And so we're looking at before. So in this image, we got a lot of green out there. That's wonderful.
Right.
Another fun thing about this kind of imagery is you can see down in the Alaska Range in the southeast corner of the image, it's blue.
Yeah.
That's glaciers and snow in the
of course.
mountains.
Okay.
So this is not really what the human eye can see. This is these wavelengths are beyond human vision, but we've made them look certain colors. So the vegetation looks green. Now let's look at that same kind of satellite recipe, but during the fires. This is in July. The fires are loose. You can see the smoke in the middle of the image, the smearing look of the smoke, and then we can see some clouds that are white, icy clouds are blue. So this is in July of 2015. The fires are doing their thing. We're burning up millions of acres. Now let's go to September. The fires are out. The audience has left the theater. You know, the event's over, right? We're done. But guess what? Now look at those brown
Oh, look at
patches.
that.
All of those places are where the fire has burned away the vegetation. So you can see where the fires were. You can add up these perimeters, get acreage burned and such. And so that's good to know. Now remember, flood follows fire, and these are also natural fire breaks. So you need to know where these guys are. In the course of the 2015 summer season, we went from before with not much burn scar in this area to just a couple months later, we can see so much burn scarring on the landscape. What's interesting too about the satellite and looking at burn scars is you realize that burn scars are the gift that keeps on giving. You can forget that a couple of years ago maybe there was a fire in a certain area, but the satellite won't forget. So in the summertime we get wildfires in Alaska, but guess what? In the visible imagery here we can see the burn scars just a little bit, but they're not as prominent as in that veggie band. But then you can't see them at all if you cover them up with snow, right?
Exactly.
So here's an image from the middle of the winter time,
wow.
and snow on the ground by this recipe looks blue. Again, these are wavelengths of light that the human eye can't really see. We're getting up into the infrared, near infrared, and the way we've assigned colors is if there's snow on the ground or there's a glacier, it looks blue, kind of intuitive. So this is early April of the following year, 2016.
Okay.
We're just about to get into breakup. We got a lot of snow on the ground, and now it's all going to melt. And as the snow melts, then you get our final image here. Doesn't this look familiar? This looks like a lot of what we saw in September of the previous summer. So this is the spring of the next year. The fires themselves might not have overwintered, they're gone, but the fire scar does. And as the snow melts away, and then you have breakup, and then you have green up, whenever the leaves come out, the grass comes back, except in the burned areas, they're having a tough time because everything got burned off the previous year. So you can see these scars even the next summer, multiple years. It depends on what kind of vegetation there is. You know, some of the tussocky tundra grasses, they'll grow back really quick, but to get a forest to come back, that'll take much longer. So these burn scars, eventually the landscape will fill in the burn scar. It will heal itself, if you want to use that metaphor. But for the next few years, you can still keep track of these on satellite. And again, the reason we want to do that is that the burn scar can facilitate a flood, and it can act like a fire break. So there you are, the veggie band.
Tools. So if you're a weather satellite and you're looking at my bowl of vegetables here, you might be able to pick out which one's the pea, which one's the tomato, and which one's the carrot, and apply that information precisely to whatever it is you're working on there. That is really fascinating stuff, that we have that capability from so high above the planet Earth, and Alaska for that matter.
Yep, eat your veggies.
Yes, definitely. I think I will. I'm hungry. Thanks so much for joining us again, Eric, and thank you for joining us for another edition of Alaska Weather Facts. We'll see you right here next time.
Welcome back. I hope you enjoyed the segment looking at the sea ice analysis here. We've got, well, not much change really from yesterday, but the big news is the southwest winds coming in to the, especially areas west of 170 west tomorrow night and on Thursday, and that'll be a pretty good blow, shove the ice back north. Actually, the ice is north of Perlos today, and that'll continue, but the southwest winds probably won't get into the areas east of 170, at least through Thursday, so probably not much change here. And for Cook Inlet, just ice course concentrations will vary greatly with the tides. And for the southeast coast forecast, looking like this, south or west, 20 to 25 knots, and variable winds at 25 on the north coast. Lynn Canal, north 35, north 25 for Stevens Passage, southeast or southwest 15 for Clarence Strait. And then looking at 40-knot winds in the forecast for northern Lynn Canal, northeast 25 for Stevens Passage, down to 15 knots for Clarence Strait. Northeast, drier northeast winds here, 25 to 30 knots on the south coast, and easterlies 25 to 30 with 7 to 8 foot seas on the north coast. And for Barren Islands, northwest 30 knots, same thing for Kamishak Bay and Cook Inlet, north winds 10 to 15 knots, seas maybe up to 3 feet south of the Forelands. 25-knot winds here out of the north for the North Gulf Coast, and looking at 55-knot gusts for the eastern North Gulf Coast. Out of the Copper River Delta, that'll probably be during the early morning hours, and coming down below that in the afternoon. North 20 for Prince William Sound, seas 3 feet. Thursday, north 15 for the Sound and north 20 knots for the eastern North Gulf Coast, down to 15 on the west side. 25-knot winds for both the Barren Islands and Kamishak Bay. From the north for Kamishak Bay, southern Cook Inlet north at 20, northern Cook Inlet north winds 10 knots. And for Kodiak Island, northwest 25 tomorrow, 30-knot winds, Sitkinak to Castle Cape out of the northwest, and Castle Cape to Cape Sarachev here, south side of the peninsula, north at 30, top side there, north 20, and Bristol Bay north at 15. Northeast 20 knots for Bristol Bay on Thursday. Small craft advisories, Alaska Peninsula, east southeast 25 to 30 knots. 20-knot winds out of the northeast here for Kodiak Island, and from Castle Cape to Sitkinak, northeast 25. Western Aleutians, south winds increasing to 45 knots with that tight gradient ahead of the front, taking over the areas west of Kiska Island. Otherwise, you got light and variable here. Northerlies 10 to 20, Adak and Atska. Unmak Island, east-northeast 15 to 20 knots on Alaska Island. North-northeast 20 to 30 knots. And then for Thursday, Eastern Aleutians, east-southeast 25 to 30 knots. Adak and Atka, southeast 25 to 30 as well. And gale force winds out of the south and southwest for the Western Aleutians. Southwest coast, Kuskokwim Delta coastline, west 15, north 10 for the Pribilof, south 20 knots along the Yukon Delta coast, south at 10, Norton Sound, St. Lawrence Island, St. Matthew Island, southwest at 20. Then for Thursday, south winds 50 knots, St. Matthew Island, and that's going to blow that ice edge back to the Arctic. Full gales here, Yukon Delta coast, St. Lawrence Island, southeast 30 for the Pribilof, southeast 25 for the Kuskokwim Delta coastline. Southeast or variable 5 to 10 tomorrow on the eastern Beaufort Sea coast, and light winds central coast, southwest 15 on the west side, Wales to Cape Thompson, just south of 10. Big change though coming up tomorrow night and Thursday. As you'll see, we've got full gales from Wales all the way up to Cape Beaufort, 40 to 45 knots. Minimum gales say up to Point Lay at 35 knots, only 20 for the central coast, and the eastern Beaufort Sea coast swinging around to the south, but only at 10 to 15 knots. For tonight, clear and cold, 35 to 40 below upper and central Tanana Valley areas, and maybe 45 below Yukon Flats across the Brooks Range into the eastern North Slope. And below zero temperatures, Bristol Bay, all of south central Alaska, Copper River Basin, diminishing snow showers for the Panhandle, but just some isolated snow showers for tomorrow. Sunshine over the interior, skiffs of snow possible up here on the west and northwest side of this ridge axis. And then the outlook for Thursday, there's that big storm coming in, rolling up like this. Looks dry but windy for St. Lawrence Island at this point in time, but that's good for 40 to 60 mile an hour wind gusts, looking at that gradient with possibly higher gusts over toward Cape Lisburne, and throw some snow in, and you've got probably whiteout conditions all across this area up to the central Arctic coast. Thank you for joining us.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal, pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.